The story of Ruth and Naomi is more than just a biblical narrative. It is a powerful testimony of loyalty, faith, and redemption. In a world that often challenges our commitments and values, the journey of these two women shows us the true meaning of fidelity. When Ruth, a young Moabite, chose to follow her mother-in-law Naomi, she was not only choosing a path of sacrifice, but also embracing a destiny of great transformation. What can we learn from this courageous decision? How can we apply these principles in our own lives, especially when facing challenges and uncertainties? Get ready to discover how the story of Ruth and Naomi continues to touch hearts and inspire lives, offering valuable lessons for our faith journey today. Historical and cultural context. Imagine a time of uncertainty and disorder. This was the setting in Israel during the period of the Judges, which occurred around 1200 to 1020 BC. Without a king to rule, each tribe followed its own path, leading to internal conflicts and repeated cycles of disobedience, oppression, and liberation. It was a time when faith in the God of Israel was frequently tested, and the people alternated between fidelity and idolatry. The land was politically fragmented, and security was a rare luxury. In this context, family life was more than just a social structure. It was a fortress of survival. Families and tribes played an essential role in protecting and sustaining their members. Losing connection with the clan meant facing extreme vulnerabilities, especially for women who depended on husbands or sons for stability. This reality makes the story of Naomi and Ruth even more touching, as they faced life without these support figures. Women, in particular, lived under great challenges. Besides domestic responsibilities, many had to help support the family, whether by harvesting in the fields or taking care of animals. Amid this scenario, we see how God operated through difficulties, using even the most adverse moments to reveal his plan of redemption. Another important aspect was the law of levirate, which sought to preserve a family's name and inheritance. When a man died without leaving children, his brother or close relative was to marry the widow to continue the lineage. This practice, rooted in Israel's traditions, is key to understanding the depth of Ruth's story. The story of Naomi and Ruth begins in Moab, a land neighboring Israel. The Moabites, descendants of Lot, had a historically tense relationship with the Israelites. This detail adds a layer of complexity to the narrative, showing how God works beyond cultural and national barriers. It is in this setting of conflict and hope that we are introduced to the inspiring journey of these two women. Ruth and Naomi. Naomi was an Israelite woman, full of dreams and hopes, but life took her to an unexpected place. Along with her husband Elimelech and her two sons, she left Bethlehem during a severe famine around the end of the Judges period. The family sought refuge in Moab, a land that, despite being geographically close, was culturally and spiritually distant. For a while it seemed they had found stability, but unexpected tragedies changed everything. In Moab, Naomi's sons married Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth. However, the joy of these unions was short-lived. First, Elimelech died, leaving Naomi a widow. Then her two sons also passed away, leaving her completely destitute. At that time, losing a husband and sons meant not only immense emotional pain, but also the loss of any financial and social security. For Naomi, it seemed that God had withdrawn his hand of blessing. She herself admitted this, asking to be called Mara, which means bitter. And then there is Ruth, the young Moabite, who could have chosen to start a new life in her homeland, decided to stay by her mother-in-law's side. Ruth saw in Naomi more than just a family connection. She saw a connection with the God of Israel. This decision was remarkable. Even being from a different culture, Ruth chose to walk a path of loyalty and faith. Orpah, though reluctant, returned to her family. But Ruth made a choice that would change her history forever. The relationship between these two women is a testimony to the power of human connections in times of crisis. Ruth and Naomi had almost nothing materially, but they had each other. And despite the losses, Naomi began to find small sparks of hope in her daughter-in-law's dedication. Together, they decided to return to Bethlehem, a land marked by Naomi's past and the uncertainty of the future. This part of the story invites us to reflect on the impact of loyalty in difficult times. How often can a seemingly simple decision, like Ruth's, be the starting point for something extraordinary? And so, the return to Bethlehem marks the beginning of a new chapter, not only for these women, but also for God's greater plan. Ruth's decision. There are moments in life when a decision can change everything. For Ruth, that moment came on a dusty road as she accompanied her mother-in-law, Naomi, on the way back to Bethlehem. Naomi, deeply hurt by the losses she had suffered, encouraged Ruth and Orpah, her other daughter-in-law, to return to their families in Moab. To Naomi, it seemed impossible that she could offer any hope or future to these young women. Orpah, with tears in her eyes, chose to return to her native land. But Ruth did something extraordinary. With a firmness that even surprised Naomi, she uttered words that echo through the centuries. "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God my God." Ruth 1:16. With these words, Ruth not only declared her loyalty to Naomi, but also made a spiritual commitment to the God of Israel. Ruth's decision was not made out of convenience or fleeting emotion. It was an act of courage and sacrifice. She was abandoning everything she knew, her land, her people, her religion, to follow an uncertain path in a foreign land. This was something unusual for the time, especially for a woman. But Ruth demonstrated a faith that transcended borders and traditions. She saw in Naomi and the God of Israel something worth more than any security Moab could offer. The symbolism of this choice is profound. Ruth did not know what she would find in Bethlehem. Perhaps she would be rejected for being a Moabite. Perhaps she would face hunger and loneliness. But she moved forward, trusting in something greater. This decision illustrates the power of bold faith and loyalty that does not waver in the face of uncertainties. This story challenges us to think, how often do we hesitate to abandon the known to follow a higher calling? Ruth's commitment reminds us that the choices we make, especially those guided by love and faith, can become the starting point for stories of redemption and transformation. Life in Bethlehem. When Ruth and Naomi arrived in Bethlehem, the town was bustling. It was the time of the barley harvest, and the streets were filled with workers and residents. Despite this atmosphere of activity, their arrival went almost unnoticed. The two women carried with them the weight of losses and uncertainties. Naomi, aged and bitter, asked to be called Mara, a reflection of the pain she felt in her soul. To her, God's hand seemed to have turned away. But Ruth, even in a foreign land, was determined to change the course of their lives. Without resources and living in a system where widows depended on the generosity of others, Ruth took on the responsibility of providing for her and Naomi. She went to the fields to glean grain, a practice allowed by Mosaic law to help the needy. This work was arduous and often dangerous for a foreign woman, but Ruth showed courage and determination. Her willingness to work from dawn to dusk reflected not only her love for Naomi, but also her trust that something good could come from this situation. While Ruth worked in the fields, she caught the attention of Boaz, a respected and influential man in the community. He was the owner of the field where Ruth was gleaning and quickly noticed her dedication. Boaz went beyond what the law required, instructing his workers to treat Ruth with respect and allowing her to glean among the sheaves. This gesture of kindness was a glimmer of hope for the two women. For the first time, Naomi began to believe that perhaps God was still working in their lives, even if subtly. Life in Bethlehem was not easy, but it was marked by small acts of divine provision. Each day Ruth spent in the fields was a testament to her resilience and God's silent care. Naomi, upon hearing about Boaz, began to see that he could play an important role in their lives. After all, he was not only a kind man, he was a close relative with the potential to be the family's redeemer. This phase of the story teaches us about the value of hard work, courage, and trust, even amid difficulties. Although Ruth and Naomi did not yet know what the future held for them, each effort in the barley fields was paving the way for something greater. And so the story progresses, with divine plans beginning to reveal themselves in surprising ways. The role of Boaz. Boaz enters the story as a figure of stability and integrity in a period marked by instability and uncertainty. He was a respected man, a landowner in Bethlehem, and his reputation as a just and kind person was known by all. When Ruth began gleaning in his fields, he immediately noticed her presence. But it was not just Ruth's appearance or hard work that caught his attention. It was her story, her sacrifice for Naomi, and her courage in leaving Moab to embrace a new life. Upon learning about Ruth, Boaz demonstrated generosity that went beyond the social norms of the time. He not only allowed her to continue working in his fields, but also instructed his workers to deliberately drop sheaves for her to gather more easily. He ensured her safety, instructing the young men not to harass her, something crucial for a vulnerable woman like Ruth. This care revealed Boaz's character. He was a man who understood his role as protector and provider, acting as a reflection of God's care. Boaz's role in Ruth and Naomi's lives became even more significant when Naomi recognized him as the Goel, or Redeemer. In Israelite tradition, the Goel was a close relative who had the duty to redeem family members in difficulty. This could include purchasing land, protecting the vulnerable, and in some cases, marrying to preserve the family's name. Naomi, upon noticing Boaz's kindness towards Ruth, began to devise a plan for him to assume this role. The story reaches a key moment when Ruth, following Naomi's advice, approaches Boaz at night during the barley threshing. This act, although bold, was a respectful and culturally appropriate gesture to indicate her desire for Boaz to redeem her. Boaz once again demonstrated his integrity by responding with kindness and not taking advantage of the situation. He promised to resolve the matter with dignity, highlighting his intention to do everything according to law and custom. Boaz not only rescued Ruth and Naomi from their situation of vulnerability, but also played a crucial role in the divine plan. His marriage to Ruth was not just a love story, but a union that ensured the continuation of the lineage that would lead to King David and eventually to Jesus Christ. He represented God's grace in action, showing that even in the difficult days of the judges, there were men who walked with righteousness. Boaz reminds us that acts of kindness and justice, when done sincerely, can change lives and even shape history. But his story with Ruth does not end here. It continues to unfold, revealing even more of God's plan of redemption, marriage and redemption. The marriage between Ruth and Boaz was not just a union of two people, but a profound act of redemption that involved much more than romantic feelings. For Naomi, this marriage represented the restoration of hope and dignity. When Ruth and Boaz married, they were not just uniting their hearts, they were fulfilling the law of the Goel, which restored a family's name and inheritance. This marriage also meant the continuation of Elimelech's lineage, Naomi's deceased husband, and the reclamation of land that had been lost due to famine and the premature death of Naomi's sons. Boaz acted as the family's redeemer, not only fulfilling his legal obligations, but also showing his character and commitment to God. He made sure to resolve the situation correctly, even when there was another closer relative who could claim the right to redeem Naomi and Ruth. Boaz's willingness to go beyond the letter of the law, respecting the dignity of all involved, reflected unconditional love and divine goodness. The redemption symbolized by Ruth and Boaz's marriage was even more significant because of the son born from this union, Obed. This child not only restored Naomi's hope, who saw him as a sort of substitute son, but also became the grandfather of King David. David, in turn, would be the ancestor of Jesus Christ, and the inclusion of Ruth, a Moabite woman, in the royal lineage demonstrates the vastness of God's plan. It is not limited to one nation or people, but encompasses all who, like Ruth, commit to faith and loyalty. Obed's birth was a moment of great joy and celebration. The community recognized the importance of Ruth and Boaz's son, and Naomi had the chance to see her family restored. What began as a story of loss and despair ended with renewed hope and the promise of a bright future. This baby not only brought healing to a family, but also to Israel's history. Ruth and Boaz's marriage, therefore, was not just the solution to an immediate problem, but the fulfillment of a divine plan that transcends generations. It teaches us that even in the most difficult situations, God has a purpose. Redemption is something He offers to all, no matter how unlikely the path may seem, as in the case of a Moabite woman becoming part of the Messiah's lineage. Theological and spiritual themes. The story of Ruth is filled with deep theological themes that reflect central aspects of the Christian faith, especially about loyalty, love, and redemption. Ruth's loyalty to Naomi, her mother-in-law, goes beyond a mere family bond. It is an expression of unconditional love, echoing God's love for His children. When Ruth declares, "Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God," she does more than choose a life with Naomi. She chooses to integrate into the community of God's people, embracing a new identity. This decision, which may seem simple, reveals a deep surrender, reflecting a Christian's commitment to their faith and relationship with God. Ruth's commitment to Naomi can also be seen as a reflection of God's faithful and unchanging love. God, like Ruth, never abandons us, even in times of difficulty. He calls us to follow His ways, trusting in His plan for us, even when the journey seems difficult or uncertain. Ruth is a model of trust in God, and her choice to follow God and His will serves as an example of genuine surrender and faith, fundamental characteristics for a strong and resolute Christian walk. Another crucial spiritual theme in Ruth's story is inclusion. Ruth, a Moabite woman, not only converts to the God of Israel, but is also integrated into His plan of salvation. Her story is a powerful reminder that God's love and redemption have no boundaries. The gospel, the good news of salvation, is for everyone, regardless of origin, race, or history. Ruth, by becoming part of God's people, shows us that no one is excluded from His divine plan. This inclusion, so central to Jesus' ministry, echoes in the moments when He reached out to society's marginalized, showing that divine grace is for everyone. Finally, Boaz's act of redemption has a significant spiritual dimension. He is a symbol of the goal, the Redeemer, who is a precursor of Christ Himself, the Redeemer of all. Just as Boaz redeemed Ruth and Naomi, Christ redeems us from our sins, offering us a new life in His grace. Ruth and Boaz's marriage and Ruth's inclusion in David's lineage are a reflection of God's redemptive plan for humanity, a plan that reaches all peoples and generations. Redemption in Christ is not just deliverance from sin, but the total restoration of our lives, bringing us back into full communion with God. Ruth's story teaches us that, with faith, fidelity, and courage, we can be agents of transformation, both in our own lives and in the lives of others. Her journey from pain to joy, from loss to restoration, is a model of how God can transform any situation into something beautiful and redemptive, and how He uses even the most challenging moments to fulfill His eternal purposes. Legacy and contemporary relevance. The story of Ruth, despite being marked by an ancient context, resonates deeply in the lives of Christians today, offering valuable lessons about loyalty, faith, and resilience. Ruth's example, who chose to follow her mother-in-law, Naomi, amid loss and uncertainty, inspires us to be faithful, even in the most challenging situations. Often, life places us before difficult decisions, and Ruth's story reminds us that choices based on love and loyalty to God and others can yield lasting fruits. She teaches us that when we choose to remain faithful, even in times of tribulation, we can be surprised by God's blessings, as happened with her when she was graced with Boaz and the restoration of her family. Ruth's faith, her willingness to submit to the divine will, and her courage to follow an unknown path are also aspects that reflect our current spiritual journey. In a world that often challenges us to follow the easier path, Ruth's story is a powerful reminder that true faith requires courage and commitment. It takes courage to make choices that honor God and sometimes challenge social and personal expectations. This is a teaching that applies directly to our lives today, to be faithful in our walk with Christ, even when the paths seem uncertain or difficult. Furthermore, Ruth's inclusion in David's lineage, and through him in Jesus' lineage, offers us a powerful lesson about the universality of salvation. God, in His infinite wisdom, used a woman from a foreign people to be a central part of His redemptive plan. This demonstrates that no one is beyond the reach of His grace. In a world where we are often divided by cultural, social, or economic barriers, Ruth's story reminds us that all are welcome in God's kingdom. Her story is a testament that God's mercy goes beyond any human limit, reaching all those who seek Him with a sincere heart. On a more personal level, Ruth's story teaches us how we can apply its principles in our daily lives. When we encounter difficulties, it is essential to remember Ruth's loyalty and how she was rewarded. God does not fail to reward those who, with faith, persevere even in the face of obstacles. And just like Ruth, we can find our own redemption and purpose by following the plans God has for us. She invites us to trust, maintain our faith, and seek to be faithful in any situation, knowing that just like Boaz, God prepares us for moments of restoration and transformation. Therefore, Ruth's story offers more than an ancient narrative. It challenges us to live more faithfully, be more inclusive, and trust God for our redemption. Ruth's lesson continues to be relevant and necessary in our daily lives, inspiring us to live with more purpose, more faith, and more loyalty. Conclusion. Now that you have discovered the power of loyalty and faith in the story of Ruth and Naomi, ask yourself, how can these lessons transform my life? What does it mean to be truly faithful in times of adversity? Ruth's story reminds us that even in the most difficult situations, fidelity and courage can open doors for redemption. Reflecting on Ruth's life, do you feel motivated to make firmer and more confident decisions in your faith journey? Take this inspiration and let it guide your steps, just as it guided Ruth's life. If you want to continue discovering how to apply these principles in your life and grow spiritually, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and activate notifications. The best is yet to come.